Welcome to another episode of No Script, No Problem on Believe, the #1 podcast network for professionals. Do you believe? I'm your host, Steve Berkowitz. If you enjoy No Script, No Problem, please subscribe and rate the show with 5 stars. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, and TuneIn. You can also find it on Believe.com and at Believe Podcast. Follow me on social media. You can get me on Threads or Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Mastodon, even Facebook. If you're interested in advertising on the show, please contact Believe at Believe.com. Coming up first, I'm talking to documentary filmmakers Mary Robertson and Emma Schwartz, the creative forces behind the Emmy-nominated documentary series Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, which is streaming now on Max. This groundbreaking series has shed light on the troubling experiences of child actors in the entertainment industry, particularly those who worked on popular Nickelodeon shows produced by powerful showrunner Dan Schneider. And after I talk to Mary and Emma, I'll get to your reality check and talk about some of the big stories in the entertainment industry, including the layoffs at A&E, a chicken streaming service headed your way, and the death of cable TV. But first, I'm excited for you to hear from Mary and Emma. Nominated for 2 Emmys, Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV takes a deep dive into the many shows produced by writer, showrunner, and creator Dan Schneider, who was a prominent, influential, and dominant producer at Nickelodeon in its heyday, responsible for many of the network's hit shows in the 1990s through the 2010s. Some of Schneider's well-known Nickelodeon hits during this period included All That, The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious, and Sam and Cat. Schneider worked with stars such as Ariana Grande, Amanda Bynes, Drake Bell, Josh Peck, Miranda Cosgrove, and Jamie Lynn Spears. The series documents the toxic environment Schneider is accused of overseeing. Mary Robertson is an Emmy award-winning executive producer and director. In 2022, she founded Maxine, a film and television production company devoted to the creation of extraordinary journalist and filmmaker-driven nonfiction work. Prior to founding Maxine, Robertson was the showrunner of The New York Times Presents, which appears on FX and Hulu. Her efforts for the series include Framing Britney Spears and Controlling Britney Spears. Emma Schwartz is a seasoned journalist and Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker whose credits include several seasons of Frontline and The Power of the Dream. All right, enjoy the interview, and I'll see you on the other side. Mary Robertson, Emma Schwartz, welcome to No Script, No Problem. Thanks so much for doing the show.
Thank you for having us, Steve.
All right, we're going to get into Quiet on Set, Dark Side of Kids TV, but it's seriously a dark documentary series. So I want to start a little bit lighter. Can you guys just tell me a little bit about how the two of you met, how you decided to collaborate? It's not always easy as filmmakers to find somebody who is on the same page creatively, as well as, being able to work side by side on set.
It's a good question. We've never been asked that question, Steve. Emma and I met about 5 years ago. I was the showrunner in a series called The New York Times Presents, and we were looking for individuals who were really talented filmmakers and also really talented journalists. And Emma had worked for Frontline for over a decade and won many awards for her journalism and her producing, and seemed like a wonderful candidate for the position. So I was part of the team that hired Emma to direct on the New York Times Presents, and she did a wonderful job directing a film about Elon Musk. And I was tremendously impressed by her work, and I think, specifically by the incredibly thorough nature of her investigative efforts, by her ability to comprehend so much so quickly, and her real passion for filmmaking generally. It was clear then and it's clear now, that Emma is deeply devoted to this work. And we're both, I think, drawn to create work that reaches the widest possible audience, because that's ultimately how you have impact. And when it reaches that audience, our hope is that, yes, the work engages and engages the person fully, but that it also sparks reappraisal, sparks awakening, sparks thoughts on power and structure and accountability. Each project is a little bit different, but I think Emma and I are united by those goals. So that was how we met, and we've worked together for the last 5 years. Emma was the first. I founded a production company called Maxine Productions almost 3 years ago. Emma was employee number one. When she came on, she was just developing a few projects here and there, and we quickly hit upon this, and the rest is history.
So let's talk about Quiet on Set, Dark Side of Kids TV, now streaming on Max. Let's play a clip and then we'll get into it.
Working for Dan was like being in an abusive relationship.
Dan's treatment of people on his shows was an open secret.
So my lawyer filed complaints, gender discrimination, hostile work environment, harassment, and it was so devastating.
How safe can any kids be in that environment? There would be even bigger problems down the line with actual pedophiles on set. These are 3 predators who worked at Nickelodeon, all in a short amount of time.
Hey guys, we're ready for you.
It was a toxic environment. It made me trust people less.
We were there for so many hours. You get comfortable with people until you're not. I had no idea what I was saving my son from. It was a house of horrors. They find this enormous trove of child pornography. The officer said we found Ziploc bags, each one with a girl's name on it. 11 charges of child sexual abuse related to a child actor.
It made me wonder who was being hurt.
I've been waiting 17 years for today.
It wasn't dealing with anybody on the shows or anything, right?
It was a child actor.
On one of our shows.
Yes.
Okay. What started the two of you down this path to explore the toxicity on the set of children's TV? Tell me a little bit about just the genesis. I know Kate Taylor, who appeared, the journalist who appeared many times in the series. Was it her writing, or did you guys want to dig into this even before you saw her work?
We had noticed a lot of videos online on social media that cut together scenes from shows and skits that Dan had presided over and questioned the nature of the material that was in those skits and shows. And a lot of the material was arguably sexual in nature. It includes material of Ariana Grande squeezing a potato in an arguably provocative manner, or, leaning backwards, upside down over the side of a bed and pouring water on her chest. At the time of the filming, Ariana Grande was a teenager, a minor fully. So folks online had noticed these videos. Many of the folks who were posting these TikToks and posting videos on Instagram and other forums had grown up watching these shows, and they were commenting and saying, in essence, how is it that I possibly grew up watching content that was arguably sexual in nature and didn't realize it at the time as a kid? A lot of those, many sexual jokes may have gone over my head. And if in fact there was sexually suggestive manner in these shows, how did it get there? How did it end up on children's television, right? What is the power structure that permitted it? Who said no? Who said yes? Who said yes, but felt really uncomfortable about it? These were questions that we wanted to understand. And I think wanted to understand them because, yes, it was relevant, incredibly relevant to the people who participated in making those shows, because it concerns children generally, right? We're talking about working environments for children. And then because it concerns children who watch these programs, right? And I think that undoubtedly what we watch as children influences our sense of the world and its values and its priorities and what we should wear and what we should sound like and all of this. So what was made on these shows, I think looking closely at and scrutinizing what is made in those series is not a trivial matter. And we felt that it merited serious investigation. And around the same time, Kate Taylor published a piece in Business Insider that looked closely at Dan Schneider and looked closely at what was happening on some of the sets that he presided over at Nickelodeon. And she really advanced the investigation beyond what anyone had done previously, and was also taking these questions very seriously, we reached out to her and her colleagues at Business Insider, and we asked them if they would partner on this project. And they had a lot of interest in the article, but we're very fortunate that they chose Maxine. They said, yes, we'll work with you and Emma and Maxine, and then we moved to bring it to the world through a platform, and are very lucky that we found an absolutely devoted and supportive partner in investigation discovery. And once we started, I wouldn't say that it was easy and that, our phone was ringing off the hook with people who were saying, I want to share my story. I want to share my story. But Kate had given us a wonderful head start, and Emma really sort of picked up the baton from Kate and ran with it and brought many new sources into the conversation. And eventually, of course, we were able to include so many voices that had previously, not had the opportunity to share their accounts in a public forum.
When we started to dig in and talk to people, right, it's sort of a litmus test. Is this a story where there's more to find out, where there are people who think there's more to be told? And one of the things that really was evident very early on is, even if a lot of people were scared to talk, a lot of people were afraid to share their stories, overwhelmingly people said, this is an important story to tell. Keep going. I'm glad you're doing this. And, what that signaled to me is there was more to uncover and more to learn about. And I think that quickly became the case as we started talking to more and more of the former child actors, some of whom had really been holding things inside for quite literally decades, that, they wanted the world to understand so that people didn't, go through what they went through, could look at the world differently. And that was a motivation to sort of keep going and keep sort of digging to uncover more and more.
And then in terms of getting folks to start talking, in terms of finding all those people and then making them feel comfortable, lining them up, was there any sort of very specific process you went through?
It's sort of similar and different for everyone in a way, right? You reach out because you're curious and you want to understand where someone's coming from, what their experiences were. And then you keep talking. And I think one of the things is, you don't reach out to someone and say, hey, let's jump on camera tomorrow, right? That's a very scary thing to do, right? And especially when you're talking about something that's traumatic, especially when you're talking about something that happened many years ago and something that is hard to talk about, which for many people, a lot of these were difficult experiences. And so it's a process of building trust with an individual and building trust with the community of people who are aware of particular sort of moments or series of stories in that process. We had Jenny and Christy, those two writers, and, over time, them both knowing they were both in this together, I think helped them feel more confident in telling their story. Getting to know Giovanni and Brian and Kyle, some of them knew that the others were involved or talking, and that helped give them confidence to keep talking. But it, was never, okay, one conversation, I'm ready to go. I mean, that was a rarity, right? Usually it was building trust. It was often, I'm not sure, I'm highly unlikely. And then sort of over time, you might learn more, go back to them, keep the conversation open. There were people who said they were in and then they were out. That also happened too. And that's not necessarily something you see in the final product, but that is sort of part of the roller coaster that you go on. And I think because there was so much, ultimately, we still had some incredibly powerful voices and really brave people step forward.
For the audience listening, I mean, we're talking about Dan Schneider, who did shows like All That, The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious, Sam and Cat. I mean, these are iconic shows for anybody who watched Nickelodeon in that era. I thought you did a fantastic job of showing just how powerful he was at that time. What struck me was just the lack of accountability. I just kept screaming, where was Nickelodeon? Where were the executives who were on set? And it was obvious that they just trusted him. They loved him. And he was such a hit maker. But I kept going, okay, they have to be somewhere in here. So what did you find in terms of their level of involvement and their approval process?
I think one of the reasons why we undertook the project is because it felt meaningful and feels meaningful to scrutinize power structures, and particularly power structures that concern or involve children directly and indirectly. And I think we hope that folks walk away from watching this project, with big, deep thoughts about, when they should be silent and when they should speak up, and who's ultimately responsible for the safety of children on sets, or who's ultimately responsible for maintaining safe environments and ethical standards in the workplace generally.
What kind of response have you gotten since the series has aired from the industry? Like, have you heard of changes being made on set when it comes to having children on set?
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's been one of the most exciting parts of this is not just the overwhelming response and interest in the project, but, since the show aired, there's conversations about, potential legislation, looking at protections for child actors that, don't currently exist. There's a child protection workforce being started through SAG-AFTRA, as a result of some of the questions that came up from Quiet on Set. And so we're really starting to see movement on changes and impact. And, that's just on top of the broader awareness that I think a project like this does to sort of anyone in the industry who watches it and works on a set with kids every single day.
Watching the conversation that was immediately sort of provoked or stimulated by Quiet on Set expand into something that, has its own sort of energy and life force and has iterated and developed has been one of the most gratifying aspects of bringing this film into existence, this series into existence and out into the world. There are a lot of folks who came forward to share their accounts in the series, and it took great courage for them to do that. And I think it's because of their courage and their willingness and ability to share their stories publicly in this forum that others post-broadcast, post-premiere have felt comfortable then coming forward and saying, in essence, me too, or we should be thinking deeply about that. That's been pretty astonishing. And our hearts and hats, our hearts are with and our hats go off to all of the contributors in our series who came forward.
So I do want to congratulate the two of you on 2 Emmy nominations, one for Best Nonfiction or Documentary Series, the other for Picture Editing, Nonfiction Picture Editing. In the documentary series, it's a tough category. You got Beckham, Stax, Soulsville, USA, Telemarketers, which is a tough one. So I'm an Emmy voter. Yeah. Talk to me. Why should I vote for Quiet on Set?
Oh my gosh. Well, we don't want to grovel for your vote. You just articulated and named, and the Jinx Part 2 is in there as well. Some wonderful documentary programs. I think it is, that the work that you just articulated exists, that it has met positive critical response, that it has found large audiences, that it has engaged Emmy voters. I think that is good for our industry. I think that is good for our culture more broadly. So I celebrate all of their work. I absolutely celebrate all of their work. Jamila Wignot, who directed the Stack series, is actually working on the other side of this wall. We're working together on another project at Maxine. So, I am here to lift up all of the work. I'm very proud of what we've done with Quiet on Set. I think that, the impact has exceeded our every expectation. I hope that the conversation grows and grows and grows. And I think certainly we appreciate everyone's consideration.
I'm just going to spill it. You do have my vote. I liked Telemarketers, but, you guys got my vote. Last question I wanted to get to you. For young producers, the delicacy that it takes to do interviews like you did with people who've, whether it's sexual abuse or even just like what the writers went through, where it's, that type of environment. When you go and interview them, can you talk a little bit about the technique?
I will just start by saying it's very important to us to adopt a trauma-sensitive practice as regards our interviews, and certainly as regards our contributors and the totality of their participation. And in part, what that means is making sure that we're not putting pressure on anyone to move past sharing what they're comfortable with. That's one of many tenets that govern and sort of shape our practice. Emma is the perfect person to speak to, though, about her practice and the approach that she took with these interviews.
I'll just jump in there to say thank you for that question. It's an important part of, I think, what we did and sort of what I take really seriously in sort of sitting down with folks. And by the time I sit down with somebody on camera to talk about something as sensitive, as traumatic, we've had many conversations already. You know them as a person, and you've talked through where are their boundaries? What are they afraid to share? Where do they not want to go? And, kind of let them lead that conversation with how much you want to disclose. And I think if somebody is really ready and willing to sit down on camera and they know they want to do that, even if they, get nervous afterwards, they know what they want to be able to say and they've thought through that. And I think you can tell when someone is ready. And I think with a lot of these individuals, there were, moments early on where you were, trying to understand, are they ready too? Because you don't want someone to feel like they sat down there and regretted it. And I think a lot of what happens is you listen in the chair and you let them take you through it and, are sort of careful in the kinds of follow-ups that you might have. You don't want to sort of put somebody in a place where they're walking through too much trauma, too much, or going back to that moment because, well, it didn't land quite perfectly, If they want to repeat it, they can, but not to push that envelope too much. And then I think a big part of it is that it's not just about sitting there for the interview. It's that you're there afterward. If they're reaching out to you, if they want to talk, if they're feeling uncertain about something, you're there for that process into the release. And I think that's an important part of the relationship and about taking care of sort of the people and that journey for them, because, it can be really scary even when you feel good about it. You might have doubts or questions later, and to have conversations about where we land and how much we're going to include, how it works out, and to sort of keep that dialogue open.
I think that's great advice for anybody who has to do one of these tough interviews. And I just want to applaud you and Mary for doing these types of series, because we are, as you know, in an age where the celebrity docuseries or documentary is preferable for a lot of these platforms as opposed to something hard-hitting as yours.
Well, thank you so much for your interest. And really, it is like that interest from people that allows us to continue to do this kind of work. And I think is a testament to the importance of it and the ability and the desire for people to really understand. So thank you again.
All right. Well, good luck with the Emmys. And thank you for doing No Script, No Problem.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Mary Robertson and Emma Schwartz. All right. Time for your reality check. Buckle up. Hang in there, because this is about 2 to 3 weeks of shit that I'm going to cover. First up, in the first week of August 2024, consider that the week that cable TV died. RIP, folks. In just 39 hours of that week, the cable TV industry lost over $15 billion in value. That's right, folks. In less time than it takes to binge watch a season of your favorite TV show or streaming show, as now we know is what people do, 3 major media companies reassessed their cable networks and collectively wrote off more than $15 billion. Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount Global, and AMC Networks all announced massive devaluations of their cable channels, signaling what many analysts, journalists, and folks who hate life are calling the death of cable TV as we know it. After WBD CEO David Zaslav enjoyed a wonderful few weeks in Paris hobnobbing with celebrities like Tom Cruise at the Olympics, he announced the Warner Media Channels and Discovery Inc. networks are worth $9.1 billion less than he and his buddies originally thought. Just a little oops. Naturally, the stock then hit its lowest point ever. The Disco Bros includes HBO, CNN, Discovery Channel, TLC, HGTV, and several other cable networks, as you know. Not to be outdone, just 24 hours later, Paramount Global announced its Viacom cable channels had previously been overvalued by $5.98 billion. No big deal. Their stock would drop 12%. Paramount Global includes MTV, VH1, BET, Nickelodeon, and a few others. The company recently shuttered Paramount TV Studios as part of a process to fire 15% of its U.S. employees. And yet it still has 3 CEOs. We're not done. Exactly 15 hours after that, AMC Networks announced its own goodwill impairment charge at just $97 million. It was much, much smaller than these networks, but it's the rule of threes, as we know. The following week, A&E Networks, that includes Lifetime, History Channel, and A&E itself, announced significant layoffs affecting numerous very talented individuals, including 2 former guests on this podcast, Amy Savitsky, Senior VP of Unscripted Development and Programming at Lifetime, and Kat Rodriguez, VP of Unscripted Development at Lifetime. They both were let go. I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of them. They are very talented and know this genre in and out. They are seasoned, well-established veterans in the unscripted TV industry. And as I've discussed, and it's been well documented in, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, The Wrap, Deadline, these layoffs are part of a much larger trend that is being seen throughout the media landscape, but is particularly coming in cable networks, which equals the elimination in jobs for folks who make reality TV. From 2000 to 2020, here are just a few of the cable networks that were launched, which produced unscripted TV programming. Oxygen, WeTV, MTV2, Logo, truTV, FYI, Esquire, which used to be the Style Network. You have Reels, OWN, Current TV, Pivot, Fox Reality Channel. The first pilot I ever show ran was for MTV2. The first series I show ran was for FYI. And the second series I show ran was for Esquire. All three of those networks no longer do original programming. Esquire doesn't even exist anymore. That kind of says everything you need to know. As for the longtime cable mainstays like MTV, Discovery Channel, E, and Bravo, they all focused heavily on unscripted programming. But now, MTV and E are zombie networks with only a handful of original programs. Bravo is held up by the resilient and popular Housewives franchise, as well as Below Deck. Discovery still has hits like Deadliest Catch, Hoffman Family Gold, and Naked and Afraid, but they are slashing budgets left and right and cutting back on new greenlights. Here, folks, are the cold, hard facts. According to Nielsen, cable penetration reached its high-water mark in May of 2011 when 90.7% of all TV households had subscribed to cable television. Fast forward to September 2023. Nielsen counts 75.3 million multi-channel households, accounting for 60.8% of all TV homes. With the loss of subscribers in third quarter 2023, there were only 3 cable networks averaging over 1 million primetime viewers. These are Fox News, MSNBC, and ESPN. Back in 2011, there had been 19 cable networks that surpassed an average audience of over 1 million primetime viewers. That is mind-blowing. Numbers don't lie, folks. They can, however, make you cry and mean you are getting fired or just not getting a job. And much has been made of cord cutting due to the cost of cable and the emergence of streaming as just a simply better, more cost-efficient and targeted product, giving you what you want whenever you want it. That is until now, where you have a dozen streamers with higher prices every year, chasing Netflix, but reducing original content and budgets on their programming so they can be profitable and make shareholders happy, regardless of the quality of the content. Plus, the reliance on library content, ads, and bundles to support all the costs of streaming does make it all feel like, say it with me, cable. I know it's not, but it definitely feels like it. Netflix is doing a live hot dog eating competition between Joey Chestnut and Kobayashi on Labor Day. They have a stunt boxing fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson coming up, and 2 NFL games on Christmas Day. And don't forget, WWE Raw comes to Netflix next year. That sounds like, again, say it with me, cable or broadcast TV. But fear not, folks. The next time you pull up to the drive-thru at a Chick-fil-A, you can not only order a chicken sandwich and some waffle fries, you can also get a new streaming service subscription. That is right. Chick-fil-A has emerged from the chicken wars and entered the streaming wars. Get ready for the ultimate chicken fighter and the amazing chicken race. All that being said, I would absolutely take a job on either one of those shows were they to exist. That's going to do it for another episode of No Script, No Problem. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, download, and rate the show with 5 stars. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can also find it at Believe.com and at Believe Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Steve Berkowitz, or you can find me on Threads and Instagram at Steve M. Berkowitz. You can also send any questions you have to No Script, No Problem Podcast at gmail.com. If you're interested in advertising on the show, please contact Believe at Believe.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Steve Berkowitz for No Script, No Problem.